Hello, welcome to the Naked Truth podcast. My name is Karen Gorenser, and today with me I have my husband Paul Gorenser, and our topic today is on marriage. So I thought I'd just share some statistics with you. So first of all, we've been married over 20 years. For us, it's been both our second marriages. The 3 kids that we have are from my first marriage. And, the term that we hear out there is blended families. And, obviously we've experienced some of the struggles that go along with that. This being our second marriage as well, none of us really knew the things we would have to deal with in a marriage, right? So you come into that marriage, you start with the previous baggage of the marriage of the past, and so that adds to challenges along the way as well. And I really do feel like, maybe it's a woman thing, but we have sort of this unrealistic fairy tale version in our minds of what a marriage should be like, and that can place unreal expectations on a marriage and pressure as well. And today, divorce is real. I was looking at some stats from the Government of Canada, and it actually says that divorces are down, why is that? So we look at those stats and we realize that during the lockdown, in these past 5 years, people went through a lot and they had to make a decision to stick it out and make it work, or they actually separated. So it actually slowed down the divorce rate, according to the stats that I had read. And the other thing that it talked about is there was a rise of common law relationships. So people just choosing to live together and not be in a committed marriage. And so the other thing that they also recognized, that domestic dispute was up 44% for women and girls who experienced that. And the stats also talked about the abuse for men and boys also, and senior abuse that also went up during that period. However, if they compare the numbers and they look at the rates of divorce in 2014, not the rates of divorce, the rates of domestic disputes and fights and things that were notified by the police. In 2022, it was 117,000, and in 2023, 139,000. So we see this rise in issues within the family. It's interesting, though, the stats, because, the reduction in separation during the lockdown was an obvious statistic, but then we have a rise in domestic dispute. So these things, are all what the dynamics are in a marriage and what really happens. And so we also look at the fact that, why is it that we've got more common law and less marriages? I think some of the things around that is it's easy. It's easier to just try it on for size, see if it's going to work out. Nobody really has to be fully committed. If it doesn't work out, we can just move on from that. And I actually would speak to that, maybe not on this podcast, but just even my own mentality on my second marriage that didn't serve us whatsoever. The other thing for that too is we were reading some stats about people feeling like, it was a relationship of convenience. So rather than having passionate love for one another, people just chose to, be together for convenience, for, as you and I were talking about, cost of living. It's expensive for a single person to live on their own today, versus if you live together. So sometimes best friends would just cohabitate together and they would call that a common law marriage, which is weird, but apparently it's a thing. So today specifically, I decided, it's my passion to do this podcast and to just really help people through my own personal experience. And there's, if you've listened to my intro, you will see that there's going to be lots and lots of things that we talk about. We're on our way after this to a trip to Calgary, and so he volunteered to be able to be my first guest on the podcast, and so I thought it's only fair I put myself on the hot seat for that. Okay, so are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, so what would you say was the hardest or the most difficult thing about being married to me? I'm sure there's more than one, but...
Like in the last 25 years or today?
Well, you maybe talk about, obviously we have to bring up the past too, right? Like we're different people today, but...
Well, one of the hardest things I was, and still is you have an expectation. You have high standards, very, very high standards. And sometimes it's hard to live up to those standards.
Okay.
But you still push me to live up to those standards, and it's hard.
Okay, so can you share, like, give us some examples of some of those standards?
Well, okay. When it comes to doing stuff, you like to get it done now, like yesterday. I don't work that way.
Right.
Right? I like to do it, and I do it, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I like doing it the way I do it because then I know it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you don't do it right, but what I'm saying is you just do it, and then you deal with the consequences after.
Right. Okay. Okay. Fair. So give me another example of how my high standards put pressure on you.
Because, well, it's hard to live up to those because, you know, your standards are, like I said, very high for what you see in people. You expect, your expectations for somebody is to be like you. And there's only one you. I can never be you. But you put me in that position to be you, and I'm not there.
Okay, and would you say that's still the same now, or this was more in the past?
No, it's a lot better now.
Okay.
Way better now than it was, but at the beginning it was tough.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough because you expected to be this way. Well, I wasn't that way, and I never have been that way. I mean, I've raised my life standard and all that up 100%, right? But you still maintain yours. So now, you know, I'm climbing up towards yours, but I still not close.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I guess, you know, if we look back in the past and you look at those standards, like obviously the other dynamic that really was different in our marriage was, you know, I had kids, you didn't have kids. That adds some sort of element, right? And, you know, you had to kind of learn parenting, and I had standards for parenting.
Yep.
So how would you say that affected us or you or me?
Well, I was thrown into the fire, big time, you know. So that was tough. I've never had kids. I had dogs, but never kids. But you know, and then all of a sudden you're thrown in the fire, and with, you know, you traveling, all of a sudden I'm stuck with these 3 kids. I don't know anything what to do. You know, one's 12, one's 10, and one was what, 2 or 3 at that time. Cole. It was tough. You know, the oldest one hated me because of his dad. His dad fueled their fire with lies,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which did make it easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't make it easy for them because I had no clue what I was doing. But, you know, your expectation was that I'm supposed to be where you are in parenting when I had no clue because you've already had 12 years of experiencing of parenting. I had 0, but yet you wanted me to have 12 years of experience. Does that make sense?
It does, it does.
Because you expected me to be on the same page as you when I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah. I think, you know, for me, if I could sum it up in one word, I wanted you to love my children the way I love them, I suppose. And until you became a grandparent, you really didn't understand unconditional love. would
No,
you?
no. And that was the thing is you wanted me to be that way, but I had no clue how to be that way
Right.
because I never experienced it. So until we had grandkids, and then it made it way different, right? I mean, you wanted me to be that way that I had no. It's like, how do I say it? It's like you want me to be able to drive F1 car. Like you may be an F1 driver, Formula One driver, but you want me to be on the same page as you, and I've had no training driving an F1 car. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm just using that as an analogy. It just came to me, but that's what you wanted me to be. You wanted me in the same page as you, unconditional love, just love them like my own and all that stuff. When I didn't know, I had no clue how to do that, and I didn't feel the same.
Was there an element of jealousy in that relationship?
Oh yeah, probably, because I know you love them a lot, and I wanted to be loved and all that stuff. So of course there was. Obviously, I mean, you had, your kids and then me, and I wanted to be same as your kids.
That's fair. Okay. And so when do you feel like those dynamics changed?
I think as I grew, as I started maturing and understanding, I think the big thing is we started going to church, and that helped a lot, right? Just because we had a void in our life, and then I started understanding more and more, and I started feeling what you're feeling about your kids, and I realized that I could never replace your kids or take the place of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, a lot of times I think I remember when I, had my first baby and my son Chase, and, I just loved this little being. And I remember saying, how are you going to have other kids? Like, this is what I'm saying to myself. How am I going to have other kids? How am I going to have love for my other children? Because I love this little person, right? But that's not how our heart and our love works, right? So even though I had love for my children, I still had love for you.
No, I know.
Just a different kind of love.
Yeah.
But it felt like you were jealous of the love that I had for my children.
Well, because I wanted the same.
Like, you remember we would watch movies and eat popcorn, and you would pout because they were sitting next to me versus you.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I thought the question was about you, not about
It is. It's still going to be about me.
See, that's the other thing. She likes to spin stuff around.
Okay, let's talk about that.
What's that? Spinning stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm on the hot seat, so what do you mean?
Well, we start talking about you, and all of a sudden, I'm laying on the couch, and you're sitting there with the pen and pencil like you're the psychologist. I'm like, how'd that happen? You're good at that.
Well, I don't know. I guess our understanding of communication is different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a challenge.
You're more open than I am, by far. I'm more reserved when it comes to that. I don't share my personal stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a guy thing. Guys don't talk about stuff all the time,
It doesn't make sense to me, being a woman, right?
Just like,
You go out with your brothers and,
how are they doing?
yeah. Well,
Okay.
what'd you guys talk about? I don't know.
Nothing. I don't.
I said, well, he's having a hard time, or, did you guys talk about that? No, we don't talk about that stuff. I said, well, didn't you go out to see how he was doing? Yeah, I saw how he was doing. It's just weird. But whereas if girls go out, they're going to talk about their feelings and their, so we're
Yeah, see,
very
that's the other thing.
different
Is
creatures.
you want me to be one of your girlfriends.
I just
share
want
my
you to, I want you to talk to me about how you feel.
I know. It's hard sometimes, right? I'm just not an open person when it comes to that. It's just the way I grew up, right? It's harder. It's harder. We just, didn't share our feelings like that. You came from a more of a open family. We weren't huggers until I met you. well, your family,
Yeah.
right? You know, and all that stuff. So, yeah, it was tough. It was, you know, a lot of different dynamics. You had your way set on how you want your kids raised, and I didn't always agree with it, and that's why we battled.
And in all fairness, like, and this again has a lot to do with that contractual mentality. You know, maybe we do need to talk about it now, I don't know, but do you remember the week we were getting married and you were in the hospital for diabetes, you know, and it's like 7 days before we're getting married. And I'm like, is this what I signed up for? You know, like that's, and I had like a panic attack. And do you remember I went to the hospital and said to you, okay, look, here's the deal. If you take care of your health and you look after yourself and you don't abuse your health, then we're good.
Yep.
Then I'll stay with you and I'll take care of you and whatever. But if you abuse your health, I'm out of there.
I remember that. I remember that to this day. Yeah.
That's how we started our marriage.
I know.
So going back to what I talked about earlier, where, you know, I talk about commitment versus contractual. And it wasn't until some of you guys who are listening to the podcast, you'll hear from Pastor Stella, but she really pointed that out to me. And not that long ago, like in the last 2 years, that I stepped into our marriage contractually, you know, not committed. And not from a, you know, like, you've only been the one. I mean, no, we're committed that way, but,
No, yeah.
but from a mentality and a heart perspective, and I'll talk about this, there's reasons why, but I don't want to, I mean, the podcast will last for weeks and months if I start talking. But part of the reason is just through my background and all the things and the hurts that I'd gone through, I was very guarded, right? And that in my mind, if I made that deal in my mind, I could always protect myself and I could get out.
Yeah.
Right? So that was kind of the mindset I had. So, I mean, how many fights did we have? Like rip-roaring, yelling, screaming fights, and I think I kicked you out 7 times. You never left.
Still here.
So, okay.
No. But you look at that, and we didn't realize it though until we started going to church and attending church that we got married by a justice of the peace. So we never had that contractual commitment with God. And then when we found that out, like that was what, 3 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, maybe 3, 4, when we were attending a different church and the pastor prayed over us.
When we were doing our Saturday night group too at that time, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, and so we've learned a lot, especially in the last 3 years. I think our marriage has been stronger than it's ever been.
Right. And what would be the reasons for that, in your opinion, for you personally, or
For me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just being in God's Word, you know, being there every day. I'm in it every day. Spend an hour in the morning
Yeah.
in His Word. We're growing that way. We talk about it. You know, well, once we started attending church, 2012, we started going. Once we found out what we were missing, because we knew there was a void in our life, and that's what it was. But once we started that, I think slowly our marriage started going in the better direction. Right? And then especially the last 3 years, especially, when we were locked down and all that stuff, and we still needed a void, but then we found
That'd be 5 years.
5 years, I know.
Crazy.
We started our group 5 years ago. And that changed us. That changed our whole life, starting the war room on the Saturday night, just a bunch of us gathering and doing Bible study. That totally changed our life.
Yeah, we had so much wisdom in there. It was just people who couldn't do church in their pajamas during the lockdown, and friends that were in need of fellowship, and we would just hide out. Everybody scattered their cars around my parking lot at work, and we'd lock ourselves in, and
Yep.
Everybody take a turn doing a Bible study and a lesson learned, but it was so much fellowship and so much wisdom, right? I mean, other than Corrine and Jeff, you and me and Christy and Mark, everybody else was
New. We didn't know them at all.
well, no, but I'm not talking about that. I'm saying like wisdom in terms, they've been Christians their whole lives, everybody except for you and I. And they're 65 to 75 years of age, you know, that shared so much wisdom. And,
Yep.
you know, I mean, yeah, that was definitely a huge growing period for us in so many ways.
And then from that, you know, we started really delving into the Bible more. Because we never did the Bible studies at all, really. Like
No.
we did the odd one here and there, but not to the extent that we did after that.
Yeah.
And I think that really made our marriage stronger, because then we started realizing that we had to put God first in between us.
And we actually started communicating better. We communicated through the things we were learning. And then you would share, I would share. And that, for me, I always felt like our marriage was lacking communication, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember we did that
Yes.
marriage course, right?
Yeah. And, that
And
was
we
one
sort
the
of
things.
determined what was your top 3 needs in a marriage.
The love languages.
Yeah, and then what my top 3 would be, and you know, we were like definitely on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And our personalities are very different, right? So you're like
I'm
easygoing,
cool and
laid
laid
back, and I'm like a typical A personality, go make it happen, bull in the china shop kind of.
Yeah.
And so we're very different. And so one of your needs was affirmation.
Yes.
The moment I heard that, I like roll my eyes, because I don't need that at all. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yours is communication, though.
Yeah, it is. So we were, and yours is not. So we were like, just, there were lots of things we had to learn.
I found those books, by the way.
Yeah, cleaning out. I see that. Yeah. Okay. So we kind of talked about, you know, a little bit more about, and maybe I'll have you back on the podcast and we can talk about specific things. Just this is kind of like going all over the place, trying to just have a conversation and
Right.
real life stuff. So if you look, let's say we've kind of looked at the past, we looked at, you know, where we are now. Now, if you were to sort of make an assessment, again, I'm on the hot seat, right? What patterns or particular habits did you see in our marriage that wasn't good, that I did, or I showed you, or I behaved?
Like throughout the marriage, or just, you know, specific time, or what?
Yeah, like probably from the time we got together, you know, till before, let's say, the journey of our faith.
Okay. The one thing that comes to mind is, and no matter if I was right or wrong, you always took the kid's side. And you never sided with me on certain things, even though I was right. Right? I know there was a lot of stuff, you know, I did wrong, and for that, guess what? I deserved to be, you know, told what I was doing wrong. But even when I was right, you took their side, and I think it put a wedge between us, because they always went to you that I did this, I did that, when I didn't, and then I had to justify myself, even though I didn't do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I should have taken a unified front with you and then discussed stuff behind closed doors that I didn't like, right? Instead of doing it outwardly with the kids, because it gave them leverage, and then they just play us against each other.
Exactly.
For sure.
You know, and now it's way better. Now, you know what? Now
Well,
it's-
they're adults too.
Yeah, but they also have a better understanding now, though, too, of themselves, because now they're in the same boat we were,
Right. Okay.
you know. So, but that was the one thing. But, you know, I think that got better as us and them could communicate more, so without having you in the middle.
Yeah. I think the pressure really was put on you in a lot of ways when the whole dynamic of our relationship and our roles changed, right? So if you think about, you know, typical marriage, you know, the man's out there working, the woman's raising the kids, keeping the house, the old-fashioned, like understanding of marriage, right? Today we know that, lots of husbands and wives work and co-parent and work together and stuff, but it was really different because I was running the business, and we realized that we could maximize the growth on the business if you took some of the running around of the kids. We had kids in 2 different schools and one playing competitive sports, and so my schedule was a yo-yo, and I had the office on the south side then, and we lived in St. Albert and back and forth and bouncing all over the place, and it was just really challenging. And so we came to a joint decision that it would not take very long for me to be able to replace your income if I had a few more hours available in the day. And so the roles switched. Now we used to joke about it, right? I was like the husband and you became the wife.
Yep.
Because, you were doing the house and the laundry and running the kids, and, I would just meet up at the games, whipping across the field in my high heels. And, we'd have funny stories too, because Paul'd be hanging out with all the moms, and I'd get over there and I'm like out of breath, and did I miss anything? Who scored what? And you guys are talking, the moms are all talking to you about how you get the socks so white. It was just weird, right?
I'll tell you though, Karen was jealous at that time, because she'd go, I'm gonna go pick up Cole at school, or the kids at school, and all the moms would go, where's Paul? Where's Paul?
Yeah, they had more time.
So it was a complete role. That was hard too for us to do that. That was hard. I think it was harder for you than it was for me.
What was really hard, I'm not the jealous type, like where women are concerned. But what was hard for me was my kids asked for you.
They would phone me.
And they didn't ask for me.
They would phone me for stuff instead of Karen. And I think
hard.
It was hard because you're supposed to be their mom, but yet.
Yeah, it was hard, really hard.
And that put a strain on our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in a way, because now then, I know you're not a jealous person, but there was a little bit of a green monster there, because your role as a mom got taken away from you.
Well, it's like the things they used to talk to me about, they don't talk to me about anymore, because I'm busier, and I had to schedule time in with them to make sure, like schedule games, or, go to Jenna's school, or, do stuff with Chase. I had to make time in my schedule because it got so busy, and then I would phone and check in, and then you knew stuff that I didn't know. And that was hard. It was hard.
So yeah, there's another dynamic that was in our, that kind of went into, everything's going good, and all of a sudden, flip,
Yeah.
And we got to get back out there, way out of that one too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it was challenging for you. Again, comes the standard thing, because now you're cleaning the house, but you're not cleaning it the way I want you to clean it. And that was a learning curve as well.
Remember that day you came home? I cleaned the whole house. Cleaned the house spotless. I was proud of myself. She went over to the thing with a white glove.
I did not have a white glove.
Yeah, you did. And
No, I didn't.
She goes, look at this, there's dust on there still. Remember that?
I didn't have a white glove. You're like over-exaggerating.
But that was like...
Okay, so what about some other patterns or habits?
That's one of them. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Other patterns? No, it was just that time. I think in a way it wasn't, you weren't being mean. You were just, because of you're the wife. You were the mother. You did all the housework before, and all of a sudden I'm doing it. And you were kind of, look, you can't do it as good as I can. It was kind of like that. Yeah, and then when I made supper, this is boring. You know how it is, right? No, but it wasn't in a malicious way. It was just hard for you to do that, right? And then what now? You're mad when I'm sick because now you got to do all the stuff that I do for you. Isn't that true?
Well,
you said that the other day.
I don't think I get mad when you're sick. I'm
annoyed.
Become more conscious of, the things that you do for me that,
Yeah.
I have to now do,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Which,
So then,
at the same time, though, I do tell you that I appreciate those
oh
things
no,
you do
no,
for me.
100%. We're still working out in progress because, you watch social media, you see this, you see that, and everybody's like, it's still a stigma attached to that. But in our company,
What are you talking about?
stigma attached that I should be out working, you should be at home.
Yeah. Culturally, yes.
Culturally, yes. But in our company, there's a lot of wives that do the work and the husbands stay home, look after the kids and do the housework and do all that stuff. And, there's a lot of that in our company.
Yeah.
More women now.
Role reversals. Yeah.
More women now than there was men in our company.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so I don't know how long we've been going. Does it tell me on that? We should have maybe paid attention to the time.
A little bit longer, yeah.
So just one of the things that obviously I could also speak to, and we won't be able to get into the details around it, but which you've kind of talked about things in a roundabout way that were challenges or patterns, but I think the main word is control. And that is something that, I used as a form of protection because of my past. I didn't trust men. I didn't trust you. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it was hard to get in. I called Karen. I said, you're just like the walls of Jericho, and I have to run around you 7 times blowing the horn to break down those walls. But it was true. You had a lot of barriers just because of all the hurts you had. And you know what? And some of the stuff I did, I hurt you. Not intentionally, but it happened. And then you categorized me with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was a lot harder to break down those walls and make you realize that I'm not like every other guy that hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True.
Mm-hmm. And I think you learned that. And it was, I remember when it happened, when you kind of realized it, but you worked hard on it. And then once you found out what the reasoning was behind it, and you worked hard to overcome that, you totally are 100% different person now than you were before. You're a lot more open.
I don't roll my eyes when I give you a compliment. So I try to affirm you better.
Well, no, not just me though, but just everybody, like all the guys in general, like, even our CEO, right? Battling heads and all that stuff. And I think, once you found out you had that orphan spirit, what they call it, and you worked on that. And that's one thing I got to say about you is you work on your stuff. Like personal stuff, I hauled out 3 boxes of books of your personal stuff.
Like notebooks and
notebooks
journals.
And everything in there.
Crazy.
In the shed.
Crazy, yeah. I
know. I'm like, wow. But that's one thing I gotta say that I admire about you is you work on your stuff like crazy. And you work on it hard. Like when you thought you had the orphan spirit, man, you dove all into that. 100%. So
I think that's probably a good place to kind of end the podcast, because like part of the reason of, as I've said in the intro, of wanting to do this is, just using our own life experiences and the things that I've gone through, obviously just being in leadership a long time in my life, you have to do personal development, you have to do personal growth, but yet it's like literally like peeling the layers of the onion away, because what ends up happening is the more you start to delve into who you are, the more you figure out stuff, the more God shows you stuff you need to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So even some situations not that long ago in the last couple of years that I've had to face of my own. And I was like mad. I was mad, kind of mad at God, because I'm like, are you kidding me? I have to deal with this. I already dealt with this, So these are things that we're going to talk about going forward, and a lot of, testimonial sharing about just some of the stuff that I've been through and how I've come through that. And, maybe those stories would help you and you would be able to take something from that. So I just really thank you for the time, to all the listeners. And, I hope you had some laughs and maybe saw some of your own stuff in there. And, we're going to give opportunity for you to be able to email in or call in and be able to ask some questions, and we can add some of these topics or specific areas you might have some challenges to. So thank you very much. Thanks for being honest. We have a 2-hour ride to Calgary, so
3.
Three.
Yeah.
Okay, 3-hour ride. It'll be good.
And I guarantee I'll be back on the podcast.
Okay.
That's a given.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Bye.